Hello there and welcome to ADcraft. In today's episode I've got a challenge build. So on Twitter I opened it up to the people who follow me on there at ADcraft and asked them what they would like me to build, and the response came back to say they would like me to build something futuristic. So I've got a nice new flat world and I'm going to build something futuristic here. So come with me as I get this build going. So I started out by just creating the basic shape that I wanted this to be, and I made the decision that I wanted to use a lot of curves, a lot of sweeping shapes in this build, and a lot of clean colours. So I was going for quite a clean futuristic look rather than something that's a bit more dystopian. So I wanted to do that with a couple of sweeping pillars going around a central cylinder. Now obviously sweeping curves in Minecraft, particularly ones that are going up at the same time as they're curving on multiple angles, are quite difficult to build, so there's quite a lot of trial and error involved in this. I used the smooth quartz as my base block because it is the cleanest looking white block in Minecraft. And if I did then decide that I wanted to use some stairs or some slabs, that actually gave me the option to do that. So was quite happy with the colour scheme that I came up with. And then just to differentiate from that, I used some white concrete just so that I could make sure that I was scaling to the same distance from the middle up at the top as I did further down the curve. So after I'd done the first support pillar, I went on the long and arduous task of trying to replicate that again on the other side. Now I know that it didn't manage to get it exactly the same, but in the finished build they are similar enough that I was happy with the end result. It is quite difficult to duplicate things when you're just using creative mode rather than using some of the build tools out there. Things like World Edit, for example, where you can just simply select a particular portion of the build and then rotate it or copy and paste it. I prefer to use just the tools that come with the game in the same way that I like to use the blocks and the vanilla kind of textures and things, as opposed to mods or any heavy texture packs which distinctly change how the blocks themselves look. So at this point I was just experimenting with some colours and how I wanted to fit those in. I ended up going with some cyan terracotta, which works really well with the smooth quartz, and then started trying to build out freestyle around to keep the same angle going up, just to add a bit of depth to the build. Now I realised quite quickly that that wasn't going to work very well, so I added a second circle around the edge just to give me a bit of a guide when I was looking down. Now the first circle was a 21 radius circle and this was then a 29 radius circle to give me that extra width, or it might have been 27, and it just meant that I had something to look down at, but there was quite a lot of trial and error to keep that same curve going, because you have to move up the same amount as you're moving out and forward at the same time, which when you've got a limited scope for the blocks that you have is really tricky. But in the end it did, like I say, take quite a bit of time, quite a bit of fiddling, going back and forth. You'll see me doing that and making little minor tweaks to it, stepping away from the build, which for me is always, when you're building freestyle or anything for the first time, is key to making sure that you get a result that you're happy with. Then in the end I was able to create something that I felt represented the internal and the external curve that I was looking for in these two cylinders, so I was quite happy with how that turned out. given that this is a futuristic build, I did want to try and make sure that the rotational symmetry between these two pillars that are holding up the central structure, which I get onto later, were as close or similar enough that it would pass as something that was built in the future, just because in my view they would have technology there that would allow them to sort of machine and make things in a very accurate way. So I did want to try and represent that as best as I could in this build, and keep the clean lines as much as I could. So going on later, I do go back and forth, and you'll see me sort of moving around from one side to the other to see exactly where I've placed these blocks, and there is a lot of toing and froing. As I start moving up the pillars now, I wanted to add that extra bit of depth, and with that I was using the cyan terracotta to fill in the gaps. Now the cyan terracotta is actually quite a nice shade of grey, and again it just lends itself very much to the futuristic design. It's been used a lot on the Hermitcraft server this year in the Futuristic District by Grian and Mumbo when they've done their builds. I did originally try and deliberately use something else just so it wasn't too derivative of that, but then when I looked at all the block palettes themselves, actually it was the block that did give the best look, so ended up reverting back to using it. And just it's more of a spacer really between these two areas, and I wanted to make it look like this was kind of embedded in there, like a really thick mortar, for example, something like that was just holding these two things together, and the two white sheets kind of on their own wrapping around the building were their own particular thing, and like I say, just connected with this render almost between them. I think the effect does add something that's very important to builds, which is quite a bit of contrast. With things that are mostly white, then your eye gets a little bit lost if you don't have something to focus on. You need your lights and your darks when you are making a build like this, and so by adding this cyan terracotta in there, it really did give me the effect that I was looking for and just break up the big chunks of white, so was quite happy with that. Along with the clean looks, I wanted to make sure that I used quite a lot of spheres and curves in this build, just because of the difficulty in building them. If this is a future build, then my thinking was that the difficult things they would want to seem easy, so they would use a lot of these difficult and hard to manufacture shapes, just because they could really, and to them it wouldn't really be a thing. Obviously recreating them in Minecraft does give it its challenges, but one that I thought was definitely worthwhile in creating this first of the spheres. There's actually 2 spheres that go down the inside of this. Now when you are making a sphere, I find that the easiest way to do that is actually to build the individual shapes. So you'll see me going from one side to the next, building around each of the existing layers with the next layer of shape, just because your eye can focus on shapes and the differences between shapes very easily. So when you then look between the sides, and I do it a couple of times, not so much in this sphere but in the next one that I build, you can see that immediately something looks out of place when you have built those shapes and when you're doing a direct comparison, because your eye is very good at that. So if you try and just build it based on the numbers and counting, it gets monotonous. It's easy to miss those numbers, but doing it by the shapes I've found is very much the easiest way, and has always made it much more simple to create shapes like these spheres. So after I'd finished the first sphere, and when I looked back at the build, I realised that these big flat areas on the edge, even though they were part of the shape of the circle, didn't look quite right, so I added a bit more depth to them. I go and add actually another layer to each of the sides of those a bit later on. It does take it away from the circle shape, but actually I think it matches the build much better, and it ends up with a better end result. So then I start building out the skeletons for the marking out where the second sphere is going to be, and decided that I actually wanted a dome as well, like one of these spheres was embedded into the ground, and then started building up the skeleton for that. Now I always build up the skeletons and then fill in the other bits, just because it gives me more of an idea of the 3 dimensions that I'm going to be working in. Obviously doing this in creative is easier than if you're doing it in survival. In survival you need to make sure you've got appropriate scaffolding blocks so you can get to the right places, but still make sure that you build up those skeletons of what you're looking to do, and then whenever you do look back you can get a good visual representation of what the finished build is going to look like. And so this is just me now coming back and adding that extra width that I said to the bit going round, and then filling in the cyan terracotta so that it just gave a much more pleasing curve to the eye, and I was happier with the result once I'd done that. So again, filling in this sphere is just exactly the same as I'd done previously, just building out the individual shapes for each of the sides, and then replicating that on the other 7 iterations. That one there, you can see that I've made a bit of an error, and then just by looking at it and comparing it to the other spheres circles, I worked out what I'd done wrong and managed to correct the problem. But yeah, I go ahead and fill this in. I then go and fill in the dome in exactly the same way beneath. Whilst I build these, it's worth saying that anybody who doesn't, please do make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you do hit that notification bell as well, so you know when any new videos are coming out. I've got lots of very exciting things planned and coming up very soon that I can't give you too many details about, but believe me, they should be really good, so make sure you don't miss out on those. So now the dome's built, I wanted to make sure that I added in some flooring. So again, I was going back to the smooth quartz as the block of choice, just to fill in the floor, and using the fill command in creative mode just to speed things up a little bit. I was quite happy with the look of that, and just took out those extra bits, and then started connecting up these pillars, giving some structural glass tubing that goes up all the way from the base to the ceiling. Now I didn't actually, doing a little dance there, didn't actually fill in the inside of this, just because the sort of key thing for me was getting the shape. There would be a number of things that you could put inside this. I did think about flooding it with water and turning it into a kind of an underwater overground base, which I thought would have been quite cool. Seeing fish there, having some coral and things like that, and just being able to swim up and down between the layers. But in the end, I just thought I'd leave it and let people's imaginations sort of fill in the gaps and work out what they thought that they would like to have in there. Once I'd added some lighting and added a bit more structure with the end rods, I came back to the ground and decided that I wanted another layer of quartz just as a bit of a foundation before the spheres and the domes started protruding from the ground. So I didn't want them to come straight out the ground, and that just was a nice divider from what is the light blue, I believe it's the light blue terracotta that is being used as the base of this world. I just thought that gave a nice otherworldly feel when I was picking out how to do this. And then I created almost an entranceway dome, so you come through as the main entrance, and again you could have anything in here, sort of an airlock, anything that you like in here, just to break up again the shape, so it wasn't just all an up and down. It just made it feel a bit more like it was a full habitat by adding this in. So again, using exactly the same size, looking deliberately to use that consistent circle and sphere size right the way through the build, because I just thought it really matched what I was trying to achieve. Now I did lose a bit of footage here, but I had basically just gone around, added in some more of the quartz around each of the spheres, and then some sea lanterns for some light, and then went on to terraforming. Not too much terraforming, but just around the edge. One of the things I wanted to create was like these cracks in the ground, and so used the trick where you put some hay bales and some campfires underneath the ground, and it will actually come through a couple of blocks, and you do get a little bit of steam coming out of these. I wanted to make them flush to the ground as well, so used some purple glass. And one of the things I was happiest with was actually the choice of the prismarine, because prismarine, particularly in this texture pack, goes through that colour changing cycle. It looks really, really good and very otherworldly when you build it up as rock protrusions, almost like the ground's alive a little bit, and makes it seem like it is another planet. And then also decided to come back with some of these crystals, so I just used some purple concrete, and then surrounded by glass and lots of glass panes before finishing off with a final little bit of prismarine and a final little ravine in there. And that then was the finished build. So using the vanilla textures, we're going to have a quick look around the build. Nothing too surprising here with these textures. The smooth quartz maybe isn't quite so smooth, but I think it all looks really, really good how it's come out, and I'm quite pleased with the result. So I've popped the shader pack on now to have a quick look at the build now that it's complete, and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. In fact, I went through quite a lot of thinking time, but actually it's come out better than what I was hoping for, so really pleased with that. How each angle that you look at the actual build, you get a slightly different view with these twisting pillars going up the outside, and the way that these balls and these domes look. Even though they are a bit of a pain to create, they do look fantastic. And then obviously the same with the crystals and the rock outcrops here. I think it really does add to an otherworldly type of look. So if you've also enjoyed this build, please do leave a like and a comment in the description. If you'd also like me to carry on and build some more in a futuristic style, I can carry on obviously this flat world here and build out a few more buildings, so do let me know. And now I will just pop through to nighttime, and then we can have a look at this lit up. So again, really pleased with this, where it's lit up with the moon in the background there. All of the glass, it does really make it look nice. The crystals are showing up nicely as well there, so yeah, overall I'm very pleased with it, but please do let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and see you next time on ADcraft.